I compare profit for a company as for the breath. You need to breathe to live, but your purpose in life is not breathing. The way business is done is fine the way it is, but we can enrich that with putting the human being at the center of it. Circularity is a big word. It can englobe a lot of different aspects. Nothing in life should be wasted, and everything can be reused, repurposed, or recycled. How can we create a loop that benefits everyone? It all starts with purpose, and when you lose that, you lose everything.
That is Jean-Christian Rindoni, founder of Symbiosis Infinity Group and Conscious Growth Advisor based in the Algarve, Portugal. Jean-Christian has over 20 years of international business experience across more than 30 countries and has worked at the front lines of global trade, partnerships and market development. He is now on a mission to promote more conscious business growth between the global north and south through the power of co-creation, circular supply chains, human-centered focus and sustainable sourcing models. In short, connecting value chains with people, communities and ecosystems. My name is Peter Marcus Bach, and this is the Grand Challenges Podcast, a show about inspiring individuals who are stepping up to tackle the global challenges that our world is facing in their own unique ways. We reflect on the many out-of-the-box ways our guests have navigated the complexity and intricacies of our environment at the cutting edges of science, engineering, technology and design. On today's show, Jean-Christian and I discuss the meaning of conscious growth, both at a business and personal level. Using cocoa beans as an example, we dive into circular supply chains, sustainable and ethical business models, and collaboration and co-creation. Jean-Christian highlights ways in which businesses can shift their focus back to the human elements, create value for all involved, while still making profit at the end of the day and protecting the planet while doing so. Visit tgcpodcast.show for detailed information and show notes on this episode. Thank you for joining us today, and please enjoy the show. Welcome to the show, Jean-Christian.
Thank you, Peter, for having me. It's a pleasure, and I've been looking forward to it since our first conversation.
No, definitely. And yeah, met by chance, but really, really love what you're doing and very curious to see how your journey paints in with a lot of the innovations that you're building in the world currently.
Yes. Well, it has been an interesting journey for the past, I would say, a year or so. I would say a journey that is anchored in purpose, most importantly, and purpose and growth at both personal and professional level.
No, indeed. And I think oftentimes we have to go through that personal growth to then figure out, what is it that we want to build and share with the world as well.
Correct. Yeah. Yes. It's, it always starts from within. And this is what happened to, for me at this stage in my life. Instead of looking outwards, I looked inwards and dig into my values, my true self, and the kind of impact I wanted to make around me and around the world. So this led me to a very profound journey of self-discovery. And from there, I took, what was my skills, my expertise in business, obviously my international exposure towards doing business in 30 plus countries, and combine it with meaningful business model so that we can make a difference in people's life where we can.
And that's something I'm definitely looking forward to unpacking today. And you mentioned 30 plus countries, and you find yourself now based in Faro in Portugal, in the Algarve.
Correct. So why Portugal? Well, back in the days, a long time ago, I was coming with my family here on holidays, and I really loved the environment. And I think it really combine well with what I was seeking at this stage of my life, which is purpose and peace at the personal level. I've never been a big fan of big cities, to be honest. Too much traffic, too much pollution, too many buildings. And the Algarve, actually recently, yesterday, I was reading an article that it's been ranked one of the best oceanside or seaside destination in the world.
Oh, wow.
The region, yes. So with that said, it provides safety, it provides a lot of peace, a lot of obviously beautiful ocean beaches, also a lot of nature, good food, laid back people. And it's a good compromise because you're not far away from Lisbon, which is the bustling capital of Portugal, 2.5 hours away. And you're very well connected to every European city by plane. So all in all, I've been here for 6 months now, and it was a wise choice.
Fantastic. Yeah, I have a colleague, good friend, and in fact, the first guest ever to be on this show. And he goes to Portugal once a year. He's Portuguese. And yeah, I mean, he actually spoke all about the Azores on his episode, in the very first one of the show. But he does go to the Algarve a lot once a year, and he sends me pictures from the beaches there. Yeah. So on my to travel list, it's growing, as listeners would know, but definitely have to come and visit and actually see Portugal, because I've never been there before. I had the chance. My parents went one year, but I think I was at university. So, but it'll come in future.
Yeah, absolutely. It's, the world is a small village now with especially based in Switzerland, it must be like a 2-hour flight, something like that, so not more. And the Azores, I also visited the Azores, I think 2 years ago. Beautiful archipelago of islands, volcanic islands. So it makes a very interesting contrast between, the vegetation and also the coastal areas. So all in all, I think, every part of the world offers beauty. It depends how you want to see things, as always. So some people are more into big cities and bustling lives. Some people are more into nature. Some people want to find the right balance. And from my perspective, it's always good to have a balance. Of course, going into big cities and living a bustling life, on weekends, or going to really enjoy the finer things in life, like nice restaurants, or go to the opera or theater, is great. But it's always, for me at least, it's always very important to come back to the grounding environment that helps me stay grounded, in a positive energy, and focus on my mission and my purpose.
No, definitely. And grounding, I mean, related to that also, you have tons of business experience, having been to over 30 countries and worked in business, international business, trade and commerce, in fact, all your life, and lots of different disciplines as well. But I guess one other aspect, and I always love to figure out what interests my guests other than their main profession. But one other aspect I noticed, and I'm very curious to hear about it, is that you have a master or some kind of qualification in somatic breathwork practice. Can you maybe explain to our listeners what somatic breathwork is? Because I've kind of started engaging in it a bit, but I'm still a novice here.
Yeah, thank you for asking that. So somatic breathwork, I'm a facilitator in somatic breathwork experience and journeys. So somatic, soma is the body in Greek, right? So it is basically a breathing journeys and breathing techniques that helps you unlock all the traumas and all the, I would say, emotional and physical blockages that you have within you through the power of your breath. If you look at the breath itself, it is a very powerful tool in order to regulate your nervous system. And we have something called the vagus nerve that goes all the way on down from the top of your neck all the way down to the bottom of your spine. And this basically regulates and controls your mood and your nervous system. And the best way to regulate that when, for example, when you're overstressed or when you're feeling down, is to use your breath as a tool in order to come and balance between the state that you're in and the state that you want to be in. So they always say, it's that the breath is the bridge between the spiritual world and the physical world. And we, as human beings, we don't necessarily know how to breathe because, if your breath is too shallow, if your breath is too fast, then of course, your nervous system is totally dysregulated. So coming back to your breath, pausing and taking short inhale and long exhales, for example, allows you to really come down and regulate your nervous system. And you have many different techniques from, for example, when you want to stay focused, you do a 4-4-4-4. So for example, 4 seconds inhale, 4 seconds hold, 4 seconds exhale, 4 seconds hold. And you do that for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 minutes.
They call it box breathing, don't they?
Yeah, box breathing as well. Yeah. There's many different techniques, but for me, it was presented to me on my spiritual growth journey. And I really enjoyed it because not only it served me for my personal life, but I also had the opportunity to accompany a few people during their breathwork journey and, getting the feedback that really helped them regulate their nervous system and feel better when they start their day. So I practice it, during the day several times. Whenever I feel that my anxiety levels or stress level goes up, I just pause, I lay down, and I do like 5-10 minutes of breath work, and then I go back to what I'm doing. So yeah, it's an interesting tool to have at your disposal because it's always available.
True,
so you don't need to go and buy some pills to feel better or anything else. And your body has a sense of how to self-heal and how to basically, respond to what you're feeling. And whatever you've been through in your life in terms of trauma or in terms of anxiety or fear, everything is stored in the body. So it's very important to listen to your body. And when you breathe, then you'll notice that when you're really in this kind of half meditation or a hypnosis state because of the breath work that you're doing, you'll feel that certain parts of your body are either buzzing or hurting a little bit. And this is where probably you stored some childhood trauma. And it helps you release that so that your nervous system can come back to a flow state, rest and digest state, so that you can go along with your day.
So it seems like I understood the purpose of the practice, because I did meditation for quite some time in the last few years, and I still find time every now and then. But more recently, I began breathwork, and so it seems like you're stressing the body in a way through that active breathing, which causes it to then resurface anything that might be hidden. And then eventually that's often followed by periods of relaxation before going into more rounds. And yeah, I definitely noticed that you feel calmer, you feel, I guess, more alert, I guess the ability to focus better as a result of it. So,
yep.
Yeah. Thank you for enlightening me there and confirming certain things that I've read. And sometimes it's always better to hear it from someone who's done it than having, read it yourself. So now we'll definitely exchange more notes on that. And for listeners, I guess, who are interested, I guess you can get a YouTube video that guides you through the process, right?
Oh, yeah. You have a lot of different type of breath work. Also, something that I highly recommend is to put that in your daily practice, in your daily routine, either when you start your day or when you finish your day. For example, for people that have issues quieting their mind before going to bed, this is a great practice. I know I'm guilty of overthinking, especially when the lights shut down and you get into your bed and then you start replaying your day and everything else. So it's always a good way, breathwork is always a good way to quiet your mind, and what we call the monkey mind, always this image of the monkey that's just going around and around in circles, like jumping. Yeah, so start with very small, I would say, breathing periods, like, 5 minutes, and then increase that slowly with time. And you'll feel that your life gets so much better and you're so much more grounded and calmer. So it is a very helpful tool. Again, it is free. Your breath is with you the whole time since you first go out of your mother's womb till you take your last breath. And it's something that we take for granted because breathing is normal, but we need to know, how to breathe properly. And when you know how to breathe properly, it really changes you.
Indeed. They say take some deep breaths whenever you're nervous or when you're worried.
Exactly, yeah.
I mean, there is something to that. So
absolutely.
Yeah. And in a world of business where everything is constantly bustling and, many companies are profit driven and you're trying to change that, these practices are certainly very useful for calming the mind. But I'd like to get into the business side of things and also your journey, because other than a lot of these practices and sharing your experiences with the world as well, you are trying to transform the world and to get people to become more aware and pushing them towards better value creation and closing cycles towards sustainability in business. But business itself, I mean, what got you interested in studying business and not specializing particularly in a field?
Thank you for asking that. I think that's a very good question. It comes from the environment I grew up in as a child. Both of my parents were entrepreneurs and small businesses. My mom owned a small grocery store. My dad was a salesman in building materials. And then after he opened his own company in trading in building materials. So I was raised with this environment of, do-it-yourself, of entrepreneurship. And that's what pushed me to study international business at university. Paradoxically, I started my career as a diplomat. So it was not in the world of business, but I was also always very interested in international relations and geopolitics and building bridges between cultures and people. But after, my first 2 years as a diplomat in the cultural department of the French embassy in Slovakia, that was in 2000, I think, yes, in the year 2000. I realized that, this entrepreneurial spirit that was in me, I needed to come out.
Yes.
So this is why I decided to completely switch. And for me, I see business really as a very strong bridge to connect with people, to connect with different cultures, and to really create, I would say, impactful and meaningful human stories that can, enrich the life of people in many ways, not only financially, but also human-wise. Because when you deal with so many different countries and cultures, you learn a lot. You learn a lot from understanding the way people think, for example, in Africa versus in Asia or the Middle East. And, this is a total different view of how business is done, the different cultures, the different practices, the different negotiations, tools that are used to creating these deals. And I have a master's in international business and also in business negotiation. So this was my background, my academic background. And this was really enriched by the fact that I was lucky enough to travel the world and conduct business projects in 30 plus countries across all the different continents. And this really brought me a perspective that the way business is done is fine the way it is, but we can enrich that with putting the human being at the center of it. That means that, in the times of technology and AI, we tend to think that everything needs to be more and more automated, more and more just centered on financial results, on profit, which is, we're talking about the breath. Profit and cash, they're essential to a business. But I compare profit for a company as for the breath for a human being. You need to breathe to live, but your purpose in life is not breathing. Otherwise, you would just sit there and just breathe all day without doing anything. So for a business, I know, compare it a little bit like that. You need cash, you need profit, and you need to make money in your business in order for your business to continue. But it should not be your sole purpose. It should not be the main purpose of why you're in business.
Yeah, when you think about businesses themselves, I mean, they don't necessarily start because, the founders want to get rich and they want to make millions. I mean, maybe in some cases, but those are often, and business school, I guess, teaches this, that's often the worst reason to start a business. So there's usually some inherent purpose for starting the business that kind of gets glossed over as time progresses, and maybe, profit becomes the only means of survival. And in a way, that's what you're trying to change. And I found that quite interesting with the way you've illustrated it. I didn't study business myself, but when you think of businesses, you start to think of supply demand. They teach you that in Economics 101 as well. And with the world being so globalized, the keyword supply chain becomes very important. And related to that is interacting with humans. So being able to, I guess, source raw materials from somewhere, process it somewhere else to create the goods you want to sell, and then eventually sell it in certain locations. I mean, you can practically buy anything from anywhere in the world nowadays. Yeah. So, yeah.
Yep. The model of supply chains, I think, are rapidly evolving, and we see more and more companies rethinking the way they organize their supply chain from a linear perspective to a more circular type of supply chain. And this is what we do at the Symbiosis Infinity Group. This is the first step of our, I would say, consulting journey with companies that want to grow their business in an ethical way. And circularity is a big word. It can englobe a lot of different aspects, but we are putting always the people and the planet at the center of the circular models that we help companies design, because at the end of the day, business is done by people. And as much as being profit oriented is the start, I would say, in order to grow your business, when you go beyond that, when you analyze your stakeholder ecosystem and you see how you can create a chain of value that is benefiting everybody that's involved within your business ecosystem, then the chain becomes a strong one. There's no weak link.
Yeah.
And when there is no weak link, the chain is sustainable, it's reliable, it's resilient. And this is how it creates more benefit for the companies that are involved in the circular supply chains.
No, indeed. And as you mentioned, the Symbiosis Infinity Group is the company you founded after having worked across, I was just looking at the different areas, which I find very impressive. You were in medical devices, you worked with magnetic materials, precision electromechanical devices, you were in media as well. and also working in cognitive training. I mean, so many different areas, but you founded Symbiosis Infinity Group in 2025, I believe.
Yeah, that's
so. It's quite a young company, but you have a very strong mission related to that circularity. And so I guess there's many pathways I can take here, but maybe for the listeners first. So what is the core mission of your company?
Thank you for asking that, Peter. So the core mission of Symbiosis Infinity Group is to help companies grow their business in an ethical manner. That means by helping them to design and implement circular supply chains, specifically between emerging markets and developed markets, in order to not only co-create more value within their supply chain, but also to integrate this type of a partnership into a more sustainable and ethical way of doing business. So we start with supply chains. Why? Because supply chains are the easiest way to enter into, I would say, a solid and reliable partnership, because it's easier to, just to buy products and to sell products, but in an ethical way. And then once we have this circularity in supply chain well established, and we have the partners dealing with each other through our help and our negotiations, then the second step is to integrate more, I would say, technical partnership, more growth-oriented and co-value creation type of partnerships, where we really encourage and facilitate the transfer of technology, the transfer of know-how, and the transfer of transformation opportunities at source, so that there is a co-value creation. Because what we see, for example, between emerging markets like Africa and other countries in Europe or elsewhere in North America, is that both sides have a lot to offer to each other. But because of the linear mindset that a lot of companies still have within their supply chain, then there is no really strong value creation at source that would enable both companies to really co-create, for example, innovation and ethical growth that actually are benefiting for both parties. So we are facilitators. I am a conscious business growth advisor. So I am part of a network of 1,200 consultants across the world that is certified in conscious business growth, that is based on the principle of conscious capitalism. That was created by John Mackey, a CEO of Whole Foods back in the 90s. And the overall vision is that business should be and is a force for good, and that there are alternative ways of creating profits, but creating profit with impact and purpose. So it is anchored in this truth.
Interesting. And yeah, as you said, conscious business, just a change in the way we look at business. And reading into this in preparation for the episode, I came across a number of different frameworks, but was also reminded of the topic or similar topics that we featured on the show before. And I guess these can help illustrate why we need more conscious businesses and why we have to go from the linear to the circular thinking. I guess on the one hand is this idea of efficiency. So we've talked about this in the energy space. Listeners, you can go check out episode 42, where we talked about, trying to be too efficient, always, going for more efficient systems rather than saying, well, at some point, it's sufficient. And applied to businesses, I mean, this is really what you're seeing very frequently, profit driven, trying to make more profit with less effort. And I guess it's done at the expense of, your supply chain. Maybe to make this a bit more, tangible for listeners, also to imagine, there's one particular example that you like to use, and it's an active area that you're in, which is the work with cocoa. So I guess if we want to manufacture a bar of chocolate, you have to source the raw materials, which often comes from the cocoa plant. And so those grow in different areas. I'm thinking, in West Africa, Indonesia, Brazil. And so you have farmers that are in the loop. They have to provide the raw materials. These are transported somewhere else. It has to be manufactured into chocolates or processed and, created. That gets sent somewhere else, for the nice wrapping, and then eventually gets sold in the store. And very linear. Except there's a problem, because the more you try to manufacture, the more waste there is, the more the farmers have to farm. And I guess that puts pressure on the system. So how do you solve, instead of efficiency, how can we create that value, or to make more conscious business in that particular example?
It's a very good question. I'll just start with a little side story that just happened to me a couple of days back.
Yeah, sure.
On my terrace. Okay, I have a dog and he's shedding his hair. It will bring us to circularity.
It's like,
it will bring us to
bear with me.
circularity. So he's shedding his hair, and I have a huge park in front, like in front of my condo flat. And I wanted to clean the hair from the terrace. And then right after that, I saw that actually birds were coming on the terrace and they were picking the hair to build their nest.
Oh, handy.
Yeah. And I was, and this brings to circularity into, the cocoa projects that we're working on. So it is the principle that nothing in life should be wasted and everything can be reused, repurposed, or recycled. And looking at these birds taking the hair of my dog that is shedding his hair and taking this to build their nest, to build a home, this is circularity, at its finest, basically. This is what circularity is all about, is that when we have a material and a resource that can be reused and repurposed, and that has an application that serves a certain industry or a certain purpose, then it's good to actually dig into this and see how we can utilize it to create more value for everybody. So I would just wanted to tell you this little example of the birds because I thought it was very interesting.
And that in itself reminded me of a discussion I also had on the show in episode 47 where we talked about food waste because manufacturing, can lead to a lot of waste. And in particular, the case of food, it's not just the food that's manufactured, but also the food that is left uneaten as well. And so what do we do with that? And our guest then, Wei-Shan Chen, he had some interesting research showing what you can do with it. And in your case, when we think of the cocoa husk example, it's the husks that are left over from when you extract the cocoa beans.
Yeah, there's, cocoa it's a very interesting case study. Why? Because, first of all, we come at a point in the cocoa industry where the prices have gone down so much that the farmers don't even want to sell their stock. And right now, this is where there is a crisis in cocoa exports, especially from Western Africa to elsewhere, because the prices have gone down so much that the farmers are just sitting on their stock. Now, checking this situation, what we did is we did a little study about the cocoa fruit itself and say, okay, there must be other ways for the farmers to be able to generate revenues from this. So we know that the cocoa husk, that means the shell that's around the cocoa, for example, is not utilized at all. Almost nothing. That means it's after they open the husk and they take the beans that are within another shell, then it's discarded. It's left on the ground. Now, this cocoa husk, we did a lot of research and there's more and more market studies that are being put out there. It is really rich in fiber and different minerals and different substances that have very strong application in different industries. Like it can serve as a nutrient for the food industry. It can serve as a material to build sustainable packaging. After the extraction process of some chemical substances that are in the food, it can be used for cosmetics. And there are more and more research that are really promising that shows that it can be used as a biofuel material as well. So analyzing this, we started talking with the cooperatives and with the farmers in Cameroon because it's material that it's not utilized. And we are currently developing that with them to appeal to different companies in different industries to be able to create circular supply chains around the cocoa husk, as well as the cocoa bean pod, which is basically the pod that's around the bean. Now, this has a different application, but it's often used now as a charcoal or as a biomass in order to provide energy for actually the plants that transform cocoa. So here we're creating a circular model that says, okay, this particular sector has challenges. We analyze what the fruit is and how it can provide with cocoa derivative products. How can we enhance the industry and how can we present alternative for farmers to be able to make a better standard of living?
Jean-Christophe, just listening to this, when I think you're picking apart the cocoa plant, and just for listeners to know, I looked up some stats. When you think of the husk itself, that's usually 70 to 75% of the total weight of the plant. So the part you need for the chocolate is actually just a very small portion of it. But just listening to it, I had to think of Chinese cuisine. Do you know why?
Tell me.
Well, and Asian cuisine in general, but
Yeah.
when we cook a chicken, you can use different parts of the chicken for different types of dishes. I mean, in Chinese cuisine, you can roast the main breast part, you can have drumsticks that you use, and they're often used better in curries, for example. But the chicken feet as well, they have specific recipes for that. And, you can just expand that to fish as well. So you can have the fish steamed, and I love myself a good steamed fish, but we also have this so-called fish head curry, in Asian cuisine. So yeah, I guess leave no part untouched, find opportunities is what you're saying to really create, as you said, value. And in this case, the farmers will have more than one outlet for the crop, and they will reduce the amount of waste that they have because they can actually call it monetize every part of the plants that they're working so hard in the fields to culture, to nurture, to grow, and then to harvest.
Absolutely. And I think here we also see that not only for the farmers and the cooperatives and the communities that have been growing this cocoa for generations, so they have that in their DNA. So it's their core. It's more than a business. It is a tradition for them. But for, companies in developed markets as well, when we see that there is a strong commercial and industrial application and the demand is growing for this type of material, then it's a perfect combination to bring circularity to the full circle and to really design this circular supply chain in a way that it benefits not only the communities and the countries that we work in, but also the planet and their environment by, repurposing a product or a material that's not being used and that has application. And at the same time benefiting companies that are buying this product through their commercial and industrial application. So in essence, everybody wins, and this is the type of business deals that we like to have, is that everybody wins and everyone creates value together so that we can enrich people's life, not only financially, but also from the human experience and from the co-creation experience. Because when you co-create circularity around this type of projects, it brings innovation. And this is what we need. And here again, the co-value creation is super important because the farmers, they have the knowledge, they have the know-how, they have the passion for what they do, and they know their crop, they know their product.
Usually passed down generations across the family.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And the companies that we work with, our clients, mainly in Europe and North America, they have technical skills, they have the technical capabilities, they have the financial capabilities. So when you bring all this chain of stakeholders together to work together, it literally creates innovation, it creates purpose, it creates magic, and it creates more profit.
Yeah.
Because when you innovate a product together with a farmer, a cooperative, or a company in developing region, you are able to unlock innovation at source. And this innovation at source is partially yours. That means that as a company, when you do that, you have access to an innovation that you co-create and that no one else has on the market because you're helping co-create it. That gives you a big competitive edge compared to your competitors because you're able to come on the market with a product that's innovative, that has no competition, and that is also relatively well placed price-wise on the market because you are a first mover. And sometimes you do not need to spend so many millions in R&D in your lab in Switzerland or in France or elsewhere, but rather go and co-create and communicate with these farmers, this cooperative, in order to really unlock this innovation. And this is where we help push this forward.
And so that entire loop that you described, from the farmers through to the companies that know the technical side, that knowledge, which is a vast amount of knowledge because it's highly interdisciplinary just to manufacture a product. That in itself is what Symbiosis Infinity Group is trying to guide, trying to steer, advise, help, and also create as a result of it in using a concept that you call the Symbiosis Infinity Loop. Essentially, that is what you try to do, an integrated approach that tries to create that circular and, I guess, enhanced value chain. Can you describe the concept or the main idea of the Infinity Loop?
The Infinity Loop is the process that we use, and it's a trademark that we came up with because we wanted to go, I would say, beyond and a little bit deeper than just ESG or CSR strategies. We really wanted to have a hands-on approach in terms of the business process that we help company put in place. And we really wanted to create a model that integrates really the circularity aspect of the supply chain, but go beyond that. So what we did is we analyzed and we took what would be a stakeholder mapping of a typical, I would say, business transaction and business deal. And we took the main stakeholders of the whole chain and say, how can we create a loop that benefits everyone, including the consumers and the customers of the companies that are our clients.
So I guess there's four of them. You got the suppliers, the customers, the communities. I guess with that you refer to the people like the farmers and those that help provide the companies with the raw materials, and then the companies themselves.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And this is just, I would say surface level. Of course, there is a lot more stakeholders that are involved within the ecosystem, but this is the basic framework that we use as a start. And then, of course, depending on the different goals, the circular and sustainable goals of the companies that we work with, we analyze at deeper level other stakeholders that can actually be part of the environment and benefit from this. So the Symbiosis Infinity Loop is in the process. Why Symbiosis? First of all, the name came, I think it's very relevant and very important to mention that it's because symbiosis, we're looking at an equilibrium and a balance at scale between the different actors and stakeholders. And this is very important. And this was inspired by nature, very simply. I think we touched base when we had our first meeting, is spending time in nature. You don't need to use AI to have models that are symbiotic. You just go in nature and you understand that everything is functioning perfectly in harmony, that there is no competition. There's just harmonization and balance between the different elements.
Indeed.
And when you bring this balance, it brings sustainable interaction between the different elements of this environment. And this is what we call symbiosis. And infinity, because, it all comes down a little bit to the breathwork side of things and energy as well. There's an infinite amount of energy in the world. There's energy never disappears. It always transmutes. It always is repurposed into something else. And once you bring this symbiotic aspect towards a system that enables the regeneration, constant regeneration of the flow that is between the stakeholders, then, it's infinite, because once it starts, then it doesn't stop. And, the most important is to take one step and to create this loop that regenerates by itself.
Essentially, the circularity, infinity symbol, we can also argue if we twist it enough, it looks like a circle. But also, I guess once you create that value and you see it paying off, then you will want to explore how to, in like a stereotypical business sense, how you can create more value. But in this case, it's not just profit. It is also other benefits, human benefits, lifestyle, livelihoods, and things like that.
Yeah, correct. And this is, it's very important to also measure what we want to achieve, because circularity is, can be a very broad concept, but if you don't have any specific goals in mind, then it doesn't create the impact that you want to have. So what we do at the beginning of the circular journey that we embark with our clients on is that we identify goals and stakeholders say, okay, what do we want to achieve with these circular models? Who do we want to impact? What kind of key performance index are we going to measure? But not just the performance, also what we call key purpose index. Who do we want to impact? Why do we want to impact these people? And what is going to be the trigger down effect of having a positive impact, for example, on one particular community within the business environment, in terms of standards of living, in terms of access to education, or be able to reinvest part of the profit that, we're all making into small infrastructure project that enables people to have a better livelihood. And this is how we design and implement these projects with all this in mind. And I think it's very important never to lose sight on the goals and the purpose and the impact that you want to have.
There are some, proposals, concepts, and also examples out there in other areas of industry that try to create this shared value. I'm thinking in particular, there was a 2011 Harvard Business Review article by Michael Porter about creating shared value. Although I think, the similar ideas, but the idea of adding that loop mechanism. So I guess a basic argument towards circularity, and that, reinvestment and impact branding can be self-reinforcing drivers. So maybe more from the business psychological side. More on the practical side, I guess, is the field of industrial ecology. So symbiosis I've seen used in the Kalundborg model. It's a Danish example where there are, I think, a few industries together. I'm not as familiar with this, but reading on it, it seems like it's an industrial hub and the waste from one industry is used for another. And so, I guess call it pilot concepts, but essentially you're taking that action step to try and make it actionable. Because it's, I guess, you can't make change overnight. People have to change their mindsets as well. We need to convince, businesses, practically every stakeholder in the loop of the four that you mentioned, that this is worth their time, worth trying, worth trial and error as well. But what are some key challenges that people are going to be facing to try and implement this model successfully?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I mean, the challenges are manifold. When we embark or when we start working with our clients, our companies, the first thing that we ask them is always, why are you in business? And there's like most of the time, some of the time, the answer is, well, to make money. And I stop as it.
Yeah.
No, why are you in business?
They say if you ask why 4 times or 5 times, then people start to get to the root of it.
Yes. And it all starts here. If your purpose is just to sell your product, then you're missing out on the biggest point. Selling your product is a mean to achieve your purpose. So we always define the big why in terms of when the companies that work with us are not sure. So the first thing that we do is identify the purpose. And sometimes it's a challenge because some companies haven't even thought about what is the purpose of your company beyond selling what you're selling, beyond your business model, beyond making money. And it all starts here. So this is the number one, I would say, challenge. Number 2 is about the mindset that you just mentioned. So we are at an age where I think there's more and more consciousness elevation in our world, not only at the personal level for human beings, but also for businesses and consumers as well.
Oh, definitely.
So we are seeing an evolution where people are starting to realize that linear models are becoming obsolete, that a short-term vision of doing business is not sustainable, that when you are creating a value chain that's strong at every element of the chain, then it really creates resilience and reliability on the long term, and that, everyone can benefit from it. So the mindset is really for us to work with leaders and executives that already have this, I would say, this conscious growth mindset within them, not only as business leaders, but also as people, because it all starts with you. Everything is starting with you. And once you have this mindset, then you can easily, or you can duplicate it to you as an executive and to your entire organization, and will also help support companies in that process.
Because it acts as a vehicle for change, because you, in a way, the leader champions that change making, and they take the responsibility saying, hey, I know where we're going, and people see that confidence emanating from the leader.
That's exactly it. And the biggest challenge that we see here is to actually really embed that purpose and that mission and vision into the DNA of the company so that it just doesn't resonate with the executive team, but it has to resonate with everybody.
Yeah.
That means that everybody that goes to work every day, they know why they go to work. They have a sense of purpose.
Yeah.
And when you have a sense of purpose in your life, and I'm sure that this will resonate for a lot of people that will be watching this episode, is when you wake up without any vision, any mission, any goal, any purpose, well, your life can feel a little bit empty.
Yeah, that's true.
You're just waking up every day, but you don't know what is beyond your life. But when you wake up every day with a sense of purpose, with this feeling in your heart or in your soul that you are, yes, you are contributing, why you're waking up every day because you have a sense of purpose, then your life becomes much more meaningful. And I think it's the same for a business, whether big or small, is that when you have all your employees coming to work every day, whether it is your top executive team or the people on the shop floor, and they have the same sense of purpose, that everybody knows exactly why they come to work and what they're trying to achieve, then your company's performance is drastically increasing at all levels. So it is very important.
And this definitely harks back, listeners, if you're interested in learning more about conscious growth. I mean, Jean-Christian, you've provided some very valuable gems already, and we've had a whole episode on this on the show as well. So you can also check out 59, which I think addresses it at the more personal level as well. But certainly a revolution that we're seeing taking place. And I guess also the right time, for you to then act as a guiding hand for the companies towards more sustainable practices, because then you can show them where the value creation and I guess maximization of fulfillment can happen as well.
Yes. And don't get me wrong, Peter, this doesn't resonate with everybody. I'll be frank with you. We work with companies that are already mostly in this conscious business growth mindset, but want to take it further, one step further, that we really want to go into practical models with our loop model. What we're bringing to the table is to go one step beyond just having a strategy and ticking boxes. And I really put the emphasis on that. And I think ESG and CSR strategy is great. It needs to be, you need to have your circularity goals, your sustainability goals, and you need to have your accreditations and so on. This is very important because this is the first step of, I would say, towards a more conscious and sustainable approach of doing business. But we're here to go beyond that. We're here to put these models in place in real life and real business case situation so that we create real impact. And I think we're very complementary because we're not a big consulting firm, but our size is always very much an asset for us because we're able to be flexible. And we're able to be flexible, and I think that flexibility nowadays is super important. That's why we're able to adjust, to any type of verticals, any type of industry. And the way we structure our partnerships is we have very strong partners in every country that we are dealing with. So right now, for example, we have a strong partnerships with Roots and Suits and Power, who is a sustainability and circularity consulting firm in Cameroon. And I work closely with Linda to build these models with the cooperatives and farmers in Western Africa and in Central Africa as well, more specifically in Cameroon now. But this is our approach. So yes, it will not resonate with everybody. It will not resonate with every leader. It will not resonate with every organization. And that's okay. We'd rather work with companies that have this mindset and say, okay, yeah, this is great. This is how we want to build our business. This is our vision. This is the legacy that we want to leave. But we don't have the know-how or we don't have the contacts in this particular field in order to make it happen. We need your help. And this is where we come in.
Yeah, fantastic. I mean, being very, not selective, but at least, saying you need to have made some progress first before we can really give you the value that you are seeking. I guess to come back to the cocoa husk example as well, when we think about we discussed the many uses for the cocoa husk. And in fact, bigger companies like Nestle, Olam Food in Singapore, Barrick Calbo or Cargill in the USA, they are actively trying to do research into how they can maximize and use these kinds of waste materials in other processes and to create value from it. Would these also be potential companies that you're in discussions with, or you mention them quite actively when you talk about the example in some of your presentations.
Yes.
So what are your thoughts on even bigger companies like that?
Well, I think that they are, obviously are one of the main drivers in making this circular model happen because they have the expertise, they have the experience, they have the human resources behind this, and they have the financial capabilities to conduct those studies. And they have such large volumes of trading transactions that, their weight is invaluable when it comes to building this type of models. Now, we don't typically work with them because we tend to work with small to medium-sized organizations. But the large players are definitely, I would say, a key actor for us. Why? Because we engage with them and see what they're doing and how we can, learn from them. And if we can somehow sometimes fulfill a niche for them where they need, an extra hand. But we don't typically work with these big companies. However, we are engaging in in-depth conversation around these topics because we come in, not, I would say, on the sideline, but we come in as a consulting firm that can, benefit from their expertise, their know-how, and their studies, and duplicate that to smaller to medium-sized companies that still want to embark on these journeys, but don't necessarily have the capabilities to do so. So I would say, yes, they are obviously strong players in this type of field. They bring a lot of weight to the table when it comes to commercial volumes, but also studies and circular models that they can implement. But, these are big machines.
Yeah.
These are very big machines, and the process is slow. And, when it comes to, I would say, bureaucratic level to deal with such big organization, it's like dealing with government. It's heavy, it's big, it's very difficult to pinpoint who's doing what, where, when. So we get inspired by what they're doing, and we use that to our advantage to actually accompany smaller to medium-sized companies on similar pathways.
And the big machine often, if you see them move in a certain direction, then it's often a good sign that these concepts are starting to trickle down into practice. And so I guess it's good news overall when you start seeing the consciousness building around sustainability in such big machines.
Yeah. I mean, they're trend makers, right? So there are trends that you want to follow. There are other trends that you don't want to follow, depending on what you're trying to achieve. And here we're not trying to be mainstream, but we cannot always go against the current. And our point is not to go against the current. And we see it. There is a lot of companies, especially in the chocolate and cocoa industry, I would say, 80 to 85% of the companies that are making chocolate or using cocoa, it's all about sustainability. It's all about traceability.
Yeah.
It's all about circularity. But how does that translate for them in a practical way? You have wonderful companies like Tony's Chocolonely was a prime example of an open chain of sourcing the raw material, mostly from Ghana and Ivory Coast. And I know that we've been briefly in touch with them to introduce, we have our farmers in Cameroon as well. Cameroon is not typically on the map for cocoa producers, but the cacao in Cameroon has a very particular taste that adds a different kind of refined flavor to the chocolate. And here we're started to talk with Tony Chocolonely to say, hey, you have an open chain policy. We are connected to farmers. We bring circularity. Why not include that so that we can give, the people that use your open chain of sourcing to also be able to access our cooperatives in Cameroon. And this is, ongoing talks. Again, things don't happen overnight. It needs to make sense. There needs to be trust and I would say mutual understanding on what we want to achieve together in order to make this happen. So it's ongoing.
Indeed, but it's nice to see the openness and open policies like that in companies, I think is very important. Because often for them, it can benefit them in the long run because you can come with, a completely different country, different taste, which creates a unique product in the end.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But when I also think chocolate, I mean, I've been in the supermarkets before and listeners have probably seen this too. And one label that you tend to see on some chocolate bars is the fair trade label. And so, it presents itself as, ethical sourcing of materials and in a way trying to show that the materials are created under safe working conditions, better terms, ethical standards, sustainability, trying to be transparent about this all. It's a certification that you can get, but I guess it's also had a lot of critique, and I'm not going to go into the details there, but we'll definitely put some links in the show notes. But what are your thoughts on the fair trade story, where it's moved, and how does it differ from, I guess, really where I think your unique approach is, which is conscious negotiation?
Yeah, thank you. That's a very good question. I think fair trade has been, originally from the United States, and we're also in touch with some of the members of this great organization. They've been doing some great things around raw materials like cocoa and coffee and so on. And I think that originally the idea was brilliant, and it really responded to a need that cooperatives and farmers around the world needed to get away from the volatility of market prices to ensure them that they would have a fair wage compared to what they're producing and all the input that they have. Unfortunately, I think that over the years, it became a very heavy structure with a lot of bureaucracy, a lot of also kind of, I would say, lobbying influences in different sectors. And it became more of a kind of a political organization rather than a purely business organization and conscious business growth organization, which was the original idea. At least this is my own personal point of view. After I leave, I'm not criticizing any organization, everything, whatever people can do to improve certain market trends is great. But it comes to one point when organizations scale so much that they forget the purpose that they had at the beginning. And that's, again, my personal point of view to this around fair trade. And one deviation that we saw around the fair trade accreditation or label is that it was meant to benefit farmers, right? So basically what is fair trade is that it's saying that you're going to buy a product at a premium price because the business is done in a fair way. That means that the farmers are going to get more than what they would have at the current market prices so that they can improve their livelihood. So normally, according to this principle and this mechanism, the premium that you as a consumer are paying should go to the farmer. But guess what? It's not the case anymore. Why?
Oh.
It's not the case. So the premium that you're buying, this premium price, basically the difference goes to all the intermediaries and very little actually goes to the farmer. Why? Because we have so many intermediaries in the whole chain, which are, the exporters, the importers in the country, the retailers, the sub-retailers, and so on and so forth. So you have all this chain of people that are actually getting the premium that you're paying, and only very little premium is given to the farmers. And this is where our approach with the Symbiosis Infinity Loop basically shorten this chain and say, we put you in touch directly with the cooperative, directly with the farmers. We don't deal with intermediaries or very little. Or when we deal with intermediaries or traders, these are very large organizations, but there's just one more element in the chain.
Yeah.
So what we want as much as possible is that, this premium that we are allowing the business negotiations to create is sent directly to the cooperatives, directly to the communities. And we make sure that the extra profit that we help them gain not only goes into community building, but also to innovation. Because again, we come down to this principle of the loop is that what we want is, and what is needed is to have a long-term vision of doing business and co-creation and innovation. And this innovation unlocks a lot of possibilities on all sides. And when you co-create innovation, it helps all the stakeholders to raise up their business performances and their standards of living. So it is a win-win for everyone. So just to cut a long story short, fair trade, yes, in principle, the idea was great. The idea is still great. I think they're still doing a lot of good, but I think it should be revisited to be more beneficial for the source. And that means the farmers and the cooperatives, rather than having too many intermediaries that are kind of killing the premium prices for farmers.
I guess there's always a risk once you start scaling that, more intermediaries get into the loop. And if something is wildly successful or wildly impactful, then which fair trade certainly is. I think what fair trade does incredibly well is it has brought a lot of awareness of these issues into the consumers. And I've had lots of conversations in the past, and I've seen fair trade chocolate, and they also taste just as good, even if not better. So I think that it's definitely created that awareness in the consumer side, which I think is very necessary, because without that, I think, as you said, the loop doesn't work. But it's also the perils of scale that maybe needs revision, and certainly something that I think is a very nice comparison that you made there. So thanks for sharing that. It illustrates it quite well that any great idea may start well at the beginning, but then you need to be adaptive as time passes if you want to make sure that that idea stays afloat.
Yeah. And you touch a very important point is the awareness, so the awareness around what you buy and what are the conditions in which the product that you're buying is made. Because especially also we're talking about the cocoa industry, there's a huge problem in child labor, for example. Why? Because it's, when you don't have any choice, and when you must, when you're on a survival mode, I would say on a day-by-day basis, which are most of the, how the farmers and most of the cooperatives in Africa work. It's a day-by-day basis. And we want to help, these communities and these cooperatives go beyond that and have long-term planning and have long-term contracts. This is why the first thing that we say when we connect with the buyers and these cooperatives and these farmers is that we want a multi-year contract. Because it doesn't make sense otherwise. And then what, year on year, 6 months after 6 months, you have to struggle again. You have to revisit it, and then it becomes a vicious circle. So here, it's super important to have this long-term vision, and the awareness raised around fair trade, around premium, around circularity, around sustainability, to have impact branding for consumers is extremely important, because the consumers are the basis of the loop. If no one's buying your product, there's no need to have the chain. But if the people are aware what they're buying, and that they're buying more than just chocolate, that they're buying a real community empowerment story behind, then it creates an impact branding that creates emotional bond with your consumers. And that is very powerful for three things. First, it increases customers' loyalty. That means your customers are loyal to you. And instead of having second thought or maybe going to another brand, no, they're going to stick with your brand because they know that their purchase is helping and contributing positively in one way or another. Second, it's proven that conscious branding and impact branding, when you create this type of stories, it increases the frequency of sales. That means instead of buying one chocolate bar, they will buy 2 or 3 chocolate bars. So this increases your sales revenue. And third, which is a major point, because of the customer loyalty that you have, you don't have to spend so much in branding and marketing. So when you have a targeted emotional and impact branding that's really creating this emotional bond with your customers, in essence, your profit increases because your marketing costs decrease. And here is part of the loop. And this is where it's the awareness is super important.
And essentially, you've reminded us also, because I think people tend to forget, sustainability has 3 lenses: the environmental, the economic, and the social. And so, touching upon all 3. And so, we talked a lot about the cocoa husk example, but what are some exciting things that you're embarking on now with Symbiosis Infinity Group and also personally, in your business career?
So as you know, we're quite a young company, but we've been growing very fast in a short amount of time. So we're trying to not to scale too fast. So we're really trying to focus our efforts on 1 or 2 verticals at the time. The principle of what we do can be duplicated to any type of vertical, but we really want to take this all the way to the bottom line in order to ensure that, every vertical or every project that we conduct is successful. So right now we're focusing on the cocoa vertical with the cocoa husk project. And this is really long term because it's not really a project that's going to happen overnight. We're aware of that because we are trying to be pioneers in what we do. And when you're pioneers, you're always one of the first movers. So you need to do a lot of groundbreaking work, and it takes a lot of time and dedication. But we really believe in this project. Another vertical that we are partially involved is solutions for textile recycling. And here we have another partner that's called We Disrupt Agency, and Shishing Young. She's the CEO and founder of We Disrupt Agency, and they've been in the circular fashion business for the past 20 years. This is a vertical that we originally approached together with Shishing because of the new regulations from the European Union and the responsibility of the brands put on the brands for being, responsible for recycling and repurposing their garments. But this is coming into effect in 2030. So we see that companies are not really engaging fully as they should, but this will come in the next, I would say, 1 or 2 years. And here we work with this wonderful agency, We Disrupt Agency, to bring circularity with recycling solutions at pre-consumer waste and post-consumer waste level, because this is also another big social and environmental and economic issue when you have, in places like Ghana, in places like Chile, where you have entire landfills of textile waste are just sitting there, creating an environmental disaster, creating a social imbalance and economic, also imbalances. And when you have entire communities living in these landfills and trying to sell this clothes on the second-hand market or trying to have a wage by using this. When you can structure that in such a way to create a loop that enables full circularity, this is also our intent. But we have put this on the side for now, but this is something that we have in the back burner and that we definitely, whenever an opportunity arises, we are also ready to move forward on that. So we're trying to analyze where we really can make a difference in the different verticals that have challenges that can be overcome through circularity and sustainability. And, I believe in, in synchronicities as well in life. Yep. So, when the right opportunities are presented to you with the right people and the right circumstances, and I think, you should follow through.
Indeed. And in a way, you've positioned yourself with your rich experience across different fields. It feels like you can tackle any kind of topic when it comes to you. And it's just a matter of waiting, but very curious to see where SIG heads in future. So, but Jean-Christian, it's been a fascinating discussion around a topic that I'm finding very, very intriguing the more I look at it, because of just my obsession with finding and connecting the dots. And like I do with every guest, I'd love to ask you the key questions that all my guests answer so that listeners can get to know you even deeper. And so innovation is really that keyword center piece in business as well in particular. So what does it mean to you, and how has it shaped the way you approach challenges or opportunities in your work, the word innovation?
So innovation for me, it's first of all, it's an important part of our loop. And I think for every business, when you can always be one step ahead, it creates a competitive edge that, brings you forward within your competition environment. And innovation is, people associate a lot of innovation with tons of millions of R&D being put in innovation. And depending on where you're sitting and depending on your industry, this is true. You cannot build innovation, for example, in electronics, if you don't have a strong lab and a lot of R&D money. But there are innovations that go beyond money. There's innovation that is anchored in truth and purpose and core value creation. When we're talking about raw material, for example, that is so much availability in developing regions with not only just traditions, but a deeply anchored pride in terms of doing what they're doing. And because they have this in their DNA, as we were saying, at the beginning of this conversation, is that when you co-create innovation at source, and this becomes a very, very powerful mean for your company, not only to create impact branding, but also to differentiate yourself from your competitors. And on the other side, innovation for these communities and these companies in developing regions, it means diversification of their product range, of their product portfolio, of the business opportunities, because they have more to offer than just their regular product, or having this kind of day-to-day or short-term vision of, okay, we harvest, we dry, we sell, and we wait for the right price, and then we sell and then repeat. We try to take this beyond that so that they can really expand their business horizons and say, well, we have so much more to offer than just selling our raw material. Why don't we transform? Why don't we co-create at source? Because this is where it can become very valuable for the local economies and local communities, as well as for the companies that embark on this journey. And this is what, this is the second phase of our loop, co-creation and transformation at source. And here, if we take the example of cocoa husk, one process that is very much valuable for the food industry is the extract of pectin. And this is an ingredient, a sub-ingredient that is found in the cocoa husk that is used in all the superfood, all the nutrients, all the, I would say, as a nutrition element. And when you extract this element, then you can add it as an ingredient or as a substance within the food and beverage industry. So our idea is, of course, we start with a circular supply chain by bringing the raw material, but let's go beyond that. Let's innovate. Let's co-create at source. And here we're not saying to change the entire model right away, but having a gradually integrated ethical type of partnerships and co-creation and investment to have part of this transform at source. And this changes the lives of hundreds of thousands, if not sometimes millions of people, because you're adding value to the economy, because you're bringing technology, you're bringing know-how, you're giving the opportunity to entire sectors to elevate themselves, and they're, through the power of business, to elevate people's life and also help protect the environment. And everyone needs.
And cross-pollinating the knowledge as well, because essentially their local knowledge, the at source, is often very context sensitive, and by cross-pollinating, innovation arises as well. But I like that, going beyond and, daring to push boundaries as well in particular.
Yes.
But I do like the stereotypical R&D picture that you painted. I think I've been reading a lot of sci-fi, and it started to anchor itself into my imagination. So thanks for the enlightenment there. A bit of a refresher for me. Was there a key moment, event, person, or book that completely changed the course of your career or your mindset?
I think it has been more for me of a gradual journey. I think I always had this sense of wanting to, I would say, use my business skills as a force for good. But like most of us, and I'm guilty as charged, I was caught in the rat race and on the hamster wheel of just pursuing just economic success for myself and for my own well-being, and of course for my family to have a good standard of living. And everything happens for a reason, and everything happens in the right time in life. I'm a big believer in synchronicities, I would say. And a year and a half ago, a lot of things changed for me at a personal level, and it forced me to go inwards and to really understand what was my purpose and what was my motivation in life, rather than just making money and spending it. And this realization came gradually because I kind of put everything on hold and rethought everything from my personal to my professional life. I didn't change everything, but a lot of it I did. And I'm glad I did, because it really pushed me on the path of purpose and truth. And of course, keeping a business mind, because I'm an international business development consultant. I have a business mind. I have a very analytical mind and a business mindset. However, I complemented that with more purpose, with more impact in mind. And this really created the inner balance in me. That means profit with purpose, money with impact. And this is how I see my life today, not only in my business life, but also in my personal life. Is yes, we all enjoy the finer things in life, the nice hotels, the nice restaurants, and the nice lifestyle. But never forget to come back to this equilibrium, this balance, this sense of being grounded in nature, in truth, in the essential values of your life. Because if you go astray from that, then you lose your sense of direction and your sense of self, and you lose your sense of purpose. And it all comes back full circle. It all starts with purpose. And when you lose that, you lose everything.
And you end up a bit lost in the whole process until you find...
And we've all been there.
No, definitely. And keyword balance, I guess that's important. Everything is duality, and we need to be able to see that at every point in time.
Absolutely. Nothing is good or bad. Nothing is black or white. It all depends on what you make of what's happening in your life. So in Stoic philosophy, which I'm a very big fan of, it's not what happens to you, it's how you perceive what happens to you. As so you can have two human beings going through the same experience. One will enjoy it, the other one will hate it. Why? Because it's our perception of what happens to us that is the key element. So when you're balanced, when you're grounded, when you're authentic, and this is very important, when you are your authentic selves, no matter what, and when you keep your focus and stay very well balanced, then it's easier for you as a business person, but also as a person, to evolve with the sense that you are always making the right decision, whatever decision you're making. And we'll never know, if a decision, either a business decision or life decision, you never know. But when you're grounded, when you're balanced, through also the power of, mindfulness practices such as Qigong, Tai Chi, meditation, yoga, whatever mindfulness practice that helps you stay grounded, then your choices becomes clearer, because you are clearer and more aligned between your mind, your emotions, and your actions. And this is this interconnectedness of thoughts, emotions, and action. When everything is aligned, then it's much easier to see life much more clearly and know that you are making the decisions that are not only good for you, but also good for others. And we cannot deny that we're part of an ecosystem, whether you like it or not. We're all interconnected one way or another. So whatever you do, whatever you think, impacts other people. So might as well try to have a positive attitude and positive approach to life with positive actions that actually contribute to the well-being of the rest of your close environment, but also larger one.
Yeah, fantastic. And they say, no decision's ever the wrong decision, because given the time, given the circumstances, it was the one that had to be made. So I guess the key is make sure you're clear about it, you're conscious and aware about it when you're making these decisions.
Right, yes.
Yeah. And so, with the business mindset and doing everything you're doing, I think you're also still advising other companies as well. So lots of different elements that, and of course, mindfulness practices and other personal development practices you do. So the keyword of time management becomes very interesting. And I'd be very curious to hear, what tips and strategies can you offer in terms of time management, and how do you balance professional and personal time?
Yep. Thank you for this. Is a very good question. When it comes to time management, first, I believe in a very disciplined and routine life. And I think this is the key to be able to manage your time very well. So I tend to wake up every morning very early and always have the same type of process that starts building up my mindset right from the beginning of my day. I never start my day with phone or anything else. I always start my day. The first thing I do is make my bed, whatever happens, because it brings you a sense of structure and a sense of doing something that is anchored into a routine. And, if you want to, there was a general in the US Army that says, if you want to start by, changing the world, start by making your bed every morning. And it brings right away your mind to a structured way of building something for your day. Then, my daily routine are based on, after make my bed, drink a big glass of water because you need to hydrate your body. Then it goes into mindfulness, breath work, prayers, meditation. And only then and after 45 minutes, I start checking my phone because I need this, this day from the beginning of the day for myself to set my intention for the day and to plan my day ahead afterwards in order to have a proper time management. And then after that, during the week, it's pretty much, the same. I structured my timing is one task at a time. That means that I block 1 hour for this task, 1 hour for this task. And I try to set my, my daily goals and my weekly and monthly goals as well. And then always end up the day with a lot of good physical activity, whether it is running, whether it is going to the gym, whether it is going swimming, to really combine, mind, body, and spirit alignment. So it's about having a routine. It's about having a discipline of life that enables you to really predict your time and manage your time. Now, in terms of work-life balance, for me, I don't consider that I work. I never, for me, it's never work. It's because I love what I do and because it's part of who I am, and what built as a business person is deeply anchored in my true personal values. So the way I conduct my business is the way I conduct my life, always. And for this, so I don't make a difference, which is good and bad in a way. But, I'm sure it's the same for you. You're doing a great work and you really enjoy what you're doing. And you can sense that you have, this passion for what you're doing. And, I don't remember this quote, who said this quote, but if you love what you do, you never have to work a day in your life. And it is true. And I have two beautiful daughters, and one is 14 and she's trying to find a life path. And I said, whatever you choose to do in your life, do what makes you happy. Do what makes you happy. It doesn't matter if you're going to earn millions or if you're going to earn less money, but there's two things that are important. Is first to be respectful to everyone around you, and you respect everyone the same. Whether it is a CEO, a janitor, a cashier, everyone deserves the same respect no matter what. And second is to wake up every day in your life being happy with what you do, because I don't think there is anything fulfilling about waking up every day not enjoying your life. And I know it's a path that's not easy to take, and sometimes you have to make sacrifices, and sometimes you have to take gambles. And being an entrepreneur is not easy, especially when I started over my business last year, so when I was 47. So having a career change at 47 is not easy, but it's anchored in truth and purpose, and that's the most important. So of course, at the beginning, when all the entrepreneurs have been there, at the beginning when you create a business, it's about hustling, it's about checking your budget, and it's about making sure that you manage your time and resources very carefully, and that you compromise a little bit the lifestyle that you used to do when you had your business up and running for the past 10 years and everything was but you compromise that with purpose and truth, and that if you stayed anchored in what you do, then the results will come again. But it's all about taking a gamble, taking risk, and managing your time well as well.
From time management to just some real gems of wisdom and advice, especially for those starting out. So, it's incredible to hear it and to also think, what part of that am I applying in my own day to day? And I can certainly relate. I don't have the 9 to 5. I work when I feel like it. It doesn't feel like work to me. I just enjoy what I do. And I think that's the most important. Certainly have to do a lot more physical activity, because now that I've recently moved house, that was my physical activity. And so now I have to switch back to going to the gym or going for a run.
Yeah, I think it's important to keep a grounded mindset with your emotions that are balanced, and also with a strong fit body, because everything is combined. I used to think that just going to the gym was enough, but then I realized that everything needs to be aligned. It's like it's a chain. If one element is weak, then the whole chain is weak. So when your mindset is strong, when your emotions are grounded, and when your body is actually healthy and strong as well, then you are fully aligned. And this is how a human being should and actually gets the best out of life, I would say. There's no should, or everybody's free to do whatever they want. But once you really want to get the best out of life, you need to find this alignment within you. Whatever this means, some people are going to be more into mindfulness, some people are going to be more into physical, but try to do a little bit of everything, and to bring this harmony within you, because when the harmony is within you, then, the harmony is outside of you as well, as in with your environment. Your inner world dictates your outer world and not the opposite.
Yeah, very true. Find what works for you, ultimately.
Yeah, exactly. And we're all different. And thank God we don't like the same thing. Everybody likes the same food or the same hobbies. And as long as it makes you fulfilled and happy, just do it. And always in respect of other people. And for me, this is extremely important value, is to, whatever we do in our business, but also in our daily life, we should treat people with honesty, with sincerity, with authenticity, and with full accountability for the things we do or we don't do. And these are the values that I teach my two daughters, and that are, I would say, these are non-negotiable for me. So I also try to surround myself with people that are anchored in the same values, because these are, I would say, essentials in order to conduct aligned life and a successful business life anchored in purpose.
Fantastic. And so lots of lessons also for kids. But you yourself, what is your favorite childhood memory?
It's hard to define one moment, I think, but the memories I get mostly from my childhood, because I'm a lonely child and I didn't have any brothers or sisters, are my ability to be able to create my own kind of vision for my life and for the world around me. And when you're a lonely child, you have to be very creative. So of course you have friends, but you spend most of the time alone, and this really enables you to really have a vivid imagination. And imagination is key, because when you imagine something in your mind, you can create it in the world, in the physical world. It all starts with a thought, right? Everything that you see or that you use today started in someone's mind, in someone's thought, whether it is your computer, your phone, or your pen. Someone had the idea to create that, and then it came to reality. And how do you get the ideas? Is through imagination. So I think that also, as today with the younger generations, they read less. There's less storytelling. There's less wondering or daydreaming or going in the forest or just daydreaming about things. So, everything is on our phone, and just like scrolling, it kills our imagination. And so if it kills your imagination, it kills your creativity. And your creativity is extremely important to bringing new ideas to the world, new concepts, new relationships, new desires. And for me, one of the key elements of my childhood was to spend a lot of time alone and be creative and imagine things and create a world around me that helped me duplicate that in my adult life, saying, I don't need to conform, or I don't need to follow the path that everyone else is following, because I'm different, because we're all different, and we should all have a different path. And this is where I never really had similar pathways as everybody else when it comes to my professional career. As you saw, I jumped from being diplomat to selling advertising in international media. Then I went to China to open my own trading company that became a business development consulting company. They're involved in different industries. Because of this creative mindset that I have, I was able to really fine-tune that to the business world and be able to also spot the opportunity and adjust the models according to the opportunity. So yes, that was the idea.
As an only child myself, I can certainly relate to a lot of those moments when you're alone and you go into your world and you try and use your creativity, to, I guess, enjoy and play in your playtime. and how that then trickles into your adult life. And I guess also results in a lot of different interests, a lot of different, things you want to learn and things you want to explore as well as a result of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's, for me, there was not a one haha moment of my childhood. There's more this continuous growth through just imagination and daydream. I call it daydreaming because
daydreaming,
yeah, which I still do, by the way. I think it's very important that also people take some time to daydream, because while you're too stuck into your routine, into what you need to do, your emails, your phone calls, and your notifications, I always tell people, try to spend 5 minutes in silence. Take a break, no phone, no distraction. Either you go in nature or you lay down on your couch or on your bed and you just spend 5 minutes in silence and you let your mind wander. And this is where you'll see where your mind is wandering, because, it's only in silence that you can actually have these creative ideas.
Yeah.
It's not when you're busy watching TV or when, being with friends in a cafe or at the bars or anything else. It's really in this moments of stillness that the creativity comes in.
It's so true. I mean, I can definitely ascribe to that, because I certainly, calm myself down and get new ideas when I'm alone in nature. So yeah, do try it out. It is surprisingly difficult to sit still without any kind of phone or anything for 5 minutes and to let your mind run. But it does wonders to you. So listeners, try it out.
Yeah.
And so, Jean-Christian, lots of incredible advice, beautiful stories that you've shared. So thank you so much for being so open there. And as we near the end of this episode, there's really that one existential question that I ask all my guests, and that is, what would you most like to be remembered for?
Being my authentic self and building a business that's based on truth, on purpose, and on the principle that we are all here as human beings with the same desires for everybody. That means to have a good life, to be healthy, to have food on our table, to have a roof over our head, and to be able to give our kids a good future. And people from in Africa or people in Europe and Switzerland, it all comes down to the basic needs. And when we realize that we are all in this together and that we can co-create together while creating financial prosperity for everyone, then this is important. That this is the model, the legacy that I want to leave behind, along with all my fellow conscious business growth consultants, along with all the partners that we work with and that have the same mindset along the way. And this business model is also a reflection of who I am as a person, with rooted in authenticity, in honesty, and being always true to my values that I duplicate in my personal life, but also in my business life, because it is, I believe, from my personal point of view, the core of any human interaction should be based on these very, I would say, basic but genuine values of authenticity, reciprocity, trust, honesty, and respect.
Incredible. Where can people find you if they want to get in touch?
They can find me on LinkedIn. So, Jean-Christian Rindoni. We are very active on LinkedIn. We are, creating also a lot of events like webinars for people to participate in. So people that get to know more about circularity and what we do. And of course, they can visit our website, sigconsulting.net, and contact us. We're always happy to give advice, to connect with like-minded people, and and to partner together.
Fantastic. We'll put that in the show notes along with a lot of other information about the things we discussed today, so that listeners can read about it in depth and also get in touch as well if they want to know more. But Jean-Christian, it's been incredible having you on. I've really enjoyed the depth that we've gone into around business. I certainly learned a lot about business. I'm not a business expert here. So thanks for sharing that, and also just for being very open with your journey, which I think has been very inspiring to listen to and to also reflect personally on, and to see what similarities exist as well. So really appreciate your time, really appreciate what you do, and you being here today.
Thank you, Peter. And I would return that to you. I think the tone of your podcast is extremely, anchored in this type of topic. And I think this is a great message that you're broadcasting all around the world. And I can feel that you're really, deeply connected to this type of purposeful journeys that I'm sure that you're also, following through yourself. And I'm very grateful to be part of what you're doing. And I look forward to be able to mutually complement each other to spread not only what we're doing, but also the word around your podcast and the wonderful message that you are sending across.
No, thank you so much. And I really appreciate it. Like I do with every guest, I always give my guests the final words. So Jean-Christian, from you to the listeners, one last message for them to take away from today's show.
Yeah. So one last message would be, when you have a calling in life, when you feel that God or the universe or whatever you believe in is calling you to do, don't try to understand how it's going to work. The how is none of your problem. The why is very important. When you have a calling, just go for it. Don't try to look down the road, 5 years down the road. Just try to look one step at a time. But I would say one of the most beautiful moments of my life is happened a year ago when, apart from the birth of my children, of course, but when you have a calling and when you find your purpose, it's highly fulfilling. Don't ignore it. Don't try to suppress it because it will always come back one way or another. Don't be afraid. Take risk and go through this wonderful journey that helps you build what makes you fulfilled as a human being. But in the same time, if you can contribute to helping the world around you, it will also help the world within you. So do it.
Thank you very much. And that wraps up our conscious, educational, and insightful episode with Jean-Christian Rindoni. For more information on the power of the breath, insights into different global supply chains, or just good tips for conscious growth and building partnerships, check out the show notes for more information over at tgcpodcast.show. And as always, thank you listeners for tuning into this episode and for your feedback and support. If you are enjoying this show, I would be incredibly grateful if you could share this podcast with your family, friends, colleagues, and even fellow business partners. Follow this podcast on Spotify, Apple Music, and other podcast channels to stay up to date with the latest releases, or be part of the conversation on Instagram at TGCpodcast_official or our LinkedIn group. If you are curious about me or my work in general, you can also check out my website or social media. Head to petermbach.com, my YouTube channel, Peter Marcus Bach, that's Marcus with a C, or Instagram at petermbach87. Give me some feedback or suggest a future guest so that I can keep improving this show. The podcast's intro and outro song is called Starsky by Alex Kieran. Stay tuned for our next episode and next guest to hear how they are tackling the grand challenges.